The wind had a cruel edge that evening, scraping against the dry plains like sandpaper. The sun hung low and red over the distant hills, spilling light over a world that seemed to have forgotten softness. Dust trailed behind every step Elena Marlowe took. Her once white dress had turned gray from the road, her hair clinging to her cheeks with sweat and grit. She hadn't eaten in 3 days. Her lips were cracked, her stomach hollow and burning. Every step was a battle between her will to survive and her body's surrender to exhaustion. She had started this journey with a plan, at least she thought she had. A rumor had reached her back in Redstone: the Carter Ranch sometimes takes in folks who got nowhere else to go. She'd clung to that whisper like a prayer. But the miles had been cruel. The town was 2 days behind her now, and her strength had gone with it. Her shoes were worn through. The leather bit into her feet, and every pebble on the dirt road felt like a knife. The wind tore through her shawl and carried away the last of her warmth. Her mind wandered as she walked. She thought about the river where she used to fish with her brother before the fever took him, about the house that had burned when she couldn't pay the landlord. Everything she'd known had been stripped away piece by piece until all that remained was this: the walk toward a ranch she wasn't even sure existed. By the time the lights appeared on the horizon, she thought she might be hallucinating. A warm glow flickered in the distance, steady and golden, unlike the cruel shimmer of heat she'd been chasing all day. She blinked hard, trying to focus. No, it was real. A house. A big one. A ranch house. Her heart stumbled in her chest, beating weakly but faster now. She gripped the wooden fence for balance, dragging herself forward. The smell of hay, horses, and smoke reached her nose, and for the first time in days, she felt tears sting her eyes. She reached the gate and paused. Her whole body trembled. Every breath was a shallow gasp, every movement a protest. She looked down at her hands, dirt embedded in her skin, fingernails broken, blood at her knuckles from where she'd fallen earlier. She wanted to knock on that door, to ask for help, for food, maybe just a place to lie down for an hour. But her pride, stubborn and aching, whispered, "You've begged enough, Elena." Still, her hunger roared louder than her pride. She stumbled through the gate, the hinges groaning under her touch. The house loomed closer, large and solid, its windows glowing softly. A porch wrapped around it, and she could see the faint flicker of firelight from inside. Somewhere nearby, a horse whinnied, followed by the clank of metal from the barns. Life. Warmth. Safety. She reached the steps and gripped the railing, steadying herself. Her knees wobbled, and her breath came out in ragged gasps. She lifted her hand to knock on the door, but the world began to tilt. Her vision blurred around the edges, darkness creeping inward like spilled ink. She pressed her palm to the wood, whispering, "Please," before her strength gave out entirely. Her body crumpled against the door, sliding down until she lay sprawled across the porch boards, unmoving. Inside, Rhett Carter was finishing his supper, a quiet meal of beans and cornbread by the fire. He was a man used to silence. The ranch didn't offer much conversation, and he'd learned to live with that. He'd been alone for a long while, ever since his father passed and his brothers left for the city. His life was the land, the cattle, the fences, the endless cycles of sun and rain. When the thud hit the porch, he froze mid-bite. The sound wasn't right. Too heavy for a branch, too soft for a boot step. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the wood, and reached for the rifle leaning by the wall. The plains could be unpredictable. Sometimes it was a lost traveler, other times a thief. He unlatched the door and swung it open. At first, all he saw was darkness and the pale wash of moonlight over the yard. Then his eyes dropped to the figure at his feet. A woman. Her face half hidden by her hair, her clothes torn and filthy, her skin pale as linen. For a moment, he thought she might already be gone. He knelt down, his shadow falling over her, and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A faint pulse. Weak, but there. Relief flickered through him. "Miss," he called softly, his voice rough from disuse. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, blue, glazed, and unfocused. She stared at him as if she couldn't believe he was real. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then her head lolled to the side, and she went limp again. Rhett hesitated only a second before sliding his arms under her. She was so light it startled him, like lifting a child, or a sack of dry grain. He carried her inside, the door swinging shut behind them. He laid her gently on the old leather couch near the fire. The light played across her face, high cheekbones, lashes dark with dust, a mouth cracked but still soft. She looked like someone who'd been running from more than hunger. Rhett hung his rifle back on the wall and went to work. He fetched a basin, filled it with warm water, and found a clean cloth. As he wiped the dirt from her skin, he noticed the faint bruises on her wrists, the thinness of her arms. Whoever she was, she'd seen more hardship than anyone should. He poured a bit of water into a cup and held it to her lips. "Easy," he whispered, tilting it gently. A drop slipped past her mouth, and her throat moved weakly as she swallowed. Her eyes opened again for a brief moment, glassy but alive. "Where?" she rasped, her voice dry as dust. "You're safe," he said simply. "You're at the Carter Ranch." She tried to form another word, but her body had nothing left to give. Her lashes trembled once, then her eyes closed again. Rhett sat back, staring at her. The firelight threw her shadow against the wall, flickering and fragile. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or why she'd ended up at his door. But something in him, a quiet instinct, the same one that kept him alive through droughts and storms, told him she wasn't someone to turn away. He draped his coat over her, tucking it under her chin. The room was silent except for the crackle of fire and the faint sound of her breathing. Outside, the wind howled across the open plains, but inside, warmth began to gather again. Rhett leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered words that came from somewhere deep, somewhere he hadn't touched in years. "You're home now." The fire popped, sparks dancing up the chimney. And though she was too far gone to hear him, her face softened as if the words had reached her somewhere beyond the edge of waking. Rhett sat there through the long night, watching over her, as the ranch slept under the quiet, endless stars. The first thing Elena noticed when she woke was warmth. It wrapped around her like a soft, invisible blanket, the kind she hadn't felt since the world had turned hard. For a long moment, she just lay there, her cheek pressed against something smooth and cool, leather, maybe, and listened. A faint crackle of fire, the low murmur of the wind outside, the distant whinny of a horse. Somewhere, a rooster crowed, announcing morning to a place that already seemed alive. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. The room came into focus piece by piece, a wooden ceiling darkened by age, beams strong and straight, sunlight spilling through thin curtains, a stone hearth still glowing with embers. Then the smell hit her, coffee, fresh and rich, and something else, something warm and buttery that made her stomach twist in hunger. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. That she'd died on that road and this was heaven's first kindness. But when she tried to sit up, a sharp ache cut through her legs, reminding her that she was very much alive, and fragile. She pushed herself up on trembling elbows, the blanket sliding down from her shoulders. Someone had tucked her in, and it wasn't hard to guess who. Across the room, a man stood by the stove. His back was to her, tall and straight, his movements steady and sure. He wore a faded gray shirt rolled up at the sleeves, the fabric stretching across broad shoulders. His hair was dark, the kind that curled slightly at the ends, and she could see the faint shine of morning light along his jawline. When the floor creaked under her shifting weight, he turned. Their eyes met for the first time in daylight. "You're awake," he said, his voice deep and calm, as if he'd been expecting it. Elena opened her mouth, but no words came at first. Her throat felt raw, her lips cracked. "Where am I?" "You're at Carter Ranch," he replied. "You fainted on my porch last night." The memories came rushing back in fragments, the long road, the lights in the distance, the door, the way the world tilted before everything went dark. She swallowed hard, looking around the room again. You carried me inside." "I did," he said simply. "You didn't leave me much choice." There was a faint glimmer of humor in his voice, but not mockery. Just quiet humanity. He crossed the room, a steaming mug in one hand and a small bowl in the other. You should drink this first. It's just broth, goes easier than food when you haven't eaten in a while. She hesitated. Kindness was something she'd learned to doubt. The world didn't often give it without cost. But his tone carried no demand, no edge of expectation. Slowly, she took the cup from him, her fingers brushing his briefly. His hand was warm, calloused, real. The first sip burned a little on its way down, but it was the sweetest thing she'd tasted in months. Her eyes closed briefly, savoring it. She hadn't realized how close she'd been to breaking. Thank you, she whispered. That he shrugged lightly and sat in the wooden chair opposite her. You can thank me by resting a bit more. You've been through hell, looks like. She gave a small, shaky laugh. You could say that. Rhett studied her quietly. Her face, though tired and drawn, still carried a softness that hunger hadn't managed to erase. There was something in her eyes, some mix of pride and fear, that told him she wasn't just another wanderer. But he didn't press her for answers. He'd learned that silence was often the only kindness a person could offer. I'll fix you something solid when you're ready, he said. Got biscuits on the stove? She nodded, staring into the cup as if afraid to meet his gaze. You didn't have to take me in, she said softly. No, he agreed. But leaving someone out there to die didn't seem right, either. Her throat tightened. She'd been turned away so many times in the past month that the simplicity of his words nearly undid her. Most people don't stop for strangers, she murmured. I'm not most people, he said, and the matter-of-fact tone in his voice carried no pride, just truth. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It felt peaceful. The kind of quiet that spoke of two people who'd both spent too long around noise that didn't mean anything. After a while, he rose, went back to the stove, and returned with a small plate, 2 biscuits and a bit of jam. He placed it on the table beside her. Take it slow, he said. She stared at the food for a moment, almost disbelieving it was hers. Then she tore off a small piece and ate. It tasted like heaven and home all at once. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. That he noticed but didn't say anything. Instead, he busied himself by checking the fire, giving her space. When she'd eaten about half, she set the rest down and looked at him. You live here alone? He nodded. Mostly. Got a few hands who work the ranch, but they stay out by the barns. I keep to myself. Why? He gave a small smile. Less trouble that way. She studied him, the steady eyes, the quiet way he moved, the weight he seemed to carry without complaint. He looked like a man who had known both loss and peace, who'd chosen solitude not because he hated people, but because the world had disappointed him too many times. I know that feeling, she said softly, his gaze lifted to hers. For a moment, they just looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. Two people carved from the same silence, shaped by the same loneliness. You got anyone looking for you? He asked finally. She shook her head. No. Not anymore. Rhett didn't ask for more. Whatever her story was, he figured it would come out when she was ready, or not at all. He'd learned to let people unfold at their own pace, like a horse that had been spooked too many times. You can stay as long as you need, he said quietly. No questions, no debts. Her eyes widened. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. You needed help. That's all that matters right now. The word struck something deep inside her. No one had said anything like that to her in a long time. She wanted to protest, to remind him she had nothing to give in return, but his expression made it clear that this wasn't charity, it was decency, pure and simple. She looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. Then, thank you, Mr. Carter. Rhett, he corrected. She nodded faintly. Rhett. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting gold through the windows. Dust motes danced in the light. The world beyond the ranch stretched vast and wild, but inside that small kitchen, everything felt still. Rhett poured himself another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching as she finished the last of her meal. There was something healing in the sight of it, this fragile woman eating slowly, her color returning bit by bit. When she finally looked up again, there was a small, hesitant smile on her lips. The kind that hadn't been used in a long time. Feels strange, she said softly, to feel safe. He nodded. You'll get used to it. Her smile wavered, then grew a little stronger. Maybe I will. And as the wind swept across the wide plains outside, rattling the windows and stirring the scent of the earth, Elena realized that for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was running. She didn't feel lost, she felt home, just as he had promised.